everybody. Welcome to This Week in Pre-IPO Stocks podcast. With me, I got Nick Fusco, CEO of APU. It's this pre-IPO secondary market pricing company. Clint and Evan are focused on some other biz today, so they'll be back next week. All right, so we got three things today. SHEIN is going to IPO. So SHEIN's a fast fashion company. They're looking at a $64 billion IPO. So Nick, they did net income was $2 billion in 2023, $700 million in 2022. So big jump there, right? And then their revenue for 2023 was $45 billion. So that's a 1.4x revenue multiple, right? So I guess my question is like, first of all, are you seeing anything in SHEIN? I see nothing in SHEIN in the secondary market, right? Like that thing just doesn't trade. It's from what I can gather, but I'm interested to get your opinion.
Let's pull it up. And yeah, we do see a bit of activity here,
Okay.
but it's not incredibly substantial. So we've had in the last year 80 million worth of bid side, a little over 85 million of offer side. So it's still something, which is great. But there's definitely been a divide between the kind of various bids and offers. So the volatility on it is super high as well.
Got it.
So interesting that no one can really agree quite where the valuation should be, but it is roughly around that point that will give you those really low sub 2 multiples, which is wild. Yeah.
Well, I know one broker in I think the fellow's in Singapore, right? That says he has access to shares, right? But and then it's funny, I've called him once or twice. I'm like, all right, I have something. Let's do something here. And he's like, well, I don't know. So I don't know if he really has exposure or not. But everybody I talk to is like, that one's really hard one to trade. So that it's interesting. It's interesting to see this company at 64 though. The 1.4 multiple, ByteDance has a really low multiple too. I think it's just like these Chinese companies, they just don't get the love like kind of companies here in the US or Europe do. Not the same kind of revenue multiple, right?
Definitely not. No, and we talked about that in episode 98. No, I forget what number it was. But there's a very clear divide, at least in the secondary markets, on the multiples that the foreign companies are getting relative to the US, and also just in terms of volume. There's so much more flow on these US names, and so much more access on the US names. So it is probably just nascent for those markets or for the secondaries to expand there. But we are seeing a few more brokers pop up in Asia Pac, which is nice. So hopefully that will be rectified. But then who knows what happens in November that could change the way we observe that. And I think I was just reading an article over the weekend about how certain cap tables are trying to avoid having Chinese shareholders prior to the election as well. So I think the dynamic really could shift, and things are going to be dramatically better or dramatically worse if you want exposure to a lot of these big name Chinese stocks.
Yeah. This is going to be an interesting one. I mean, the last thought I have on this is just where it will fall out on indexes once it's public. So big company, it's gonna end up in some indexes, but since it's I think it's headquartered out of Singapore, if I'm not mistaken, right? But it does all of its manufacturing in mainland China, and then all of their customers are not in mainland China. They're everywhere else, rest of the world, right? A lot of U.S. and European buyers. So, it'd be interesting. It's probably going to. I would assume, if you look at MSCI, it's wherever the company's headquartered, right? So I suppose Singapore would be developed country, and that would put them in the MSCI EFA, right? So it'd be kind of intriguing to see how that plays out and when it gets inserted into some of those indexes. But any thoughts on indexing? I know it's an odd one with the way that's set up.
Near and dear to my heart. I mean, I did a talk on this for U.S. companies the other week, and I know that you like this as well. But where SpaceX is about the same size as Caterpillar, ByteDance is about the same size as Coke, OpenAI as Gilead, Stripe as Altria. They would just land right squarely in the S&P 500 very, very easily, and that's going to change the dynamic. I mean, for the the buying of that stock when it opens and it immediately lands within some of these marquee top 100s or top 500s, you're 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 going to get a lot of action and a lot of eyes on it for folks that are going to need to buy to maintain consistency or just make sure they don't have too much of a basis with the index. So
Right.
that will be pretty important. And I know you've got the index background as well, so I love this stuff. But I think that's a big deal. The bigger these companies get whilst private, the more of a shock they create for a lot of the mutual funds and the ETFs that would hold them later.
That is true. Yeah, I mean, I mean, we've talked about this. It's like there's almost two stock markets now, right? It's this public stock market and this private stock market, which,
Yeah.
in my opinion, is a new concept because a lot of these private stock market companies are growth companies, right? Which usually growth companies got out into the public markets earlier than they are currently. So yeah, big potential shocks to the kind of the ecosystem with
Yeah.
these coming out.
So the fun piece on that. So the companies that I just compared to, Coke, Caterpillar, Gilead, on average they're about 113 years old, and the other companies that I compared, Stripe, OpenAI, SpaceX, 14 years old. So the growth is just so explosive on these. I mean, the way the S&P 500 or any of the MSCI indices are going to look in 10 and 20 and 30 years time will be dramatically different because the pace of change is just so different. Yeah.
I tell you what, Nick, so that I've actually went back and looked at like the S&P 500 in 2008, right? To kind of current date. And the reason I picked that year was that was when the iPhone came out, right? So like the iPhone came out in 2008. So like what did the world look like kind of before apps and then after apps, right? And it was like ExxonMobil was like the biggest company. It was like very different, right? Very different than what we have today. So I think you're right, man. I think in 10 or 15 years from now, the S&P is going to look very different. And a lot of those companies will not be companies that are public today. They'll be new companies that have either are private today or haven't started yet, right? So really interesting, really intriguing. But okay, let's switch real quick to Cohere, and then I want to talk about Apple and OpenAI, right? So Cohere is a large language model. They're out of Canada. They have a $5 billion valuation. They're doing a new round. That's up 127% from the last round that they did in June of 2023, right? They have $35 million in ARR. So this is a big multiple, right? That they got here. And they have this strategic partnership with Oracle. So my question to you is more of kind of a general AI question, right? So one, how do you kind of see this AI landscape? Are we going to have AI platforms like an OpenAI, a Cohere, an Anthropic, a Google, et cetera, where there's like these platforms that other companies come and build on top of, and that will be the kind of the use? Or is it companies will build their own models, their own large language models? Will be a little bit of both? Like, kind of how are you falling out on this? Because Cohere is an interesting business, but I mean, it's starting to get competitive with the number of kind of these like large language model providers that are out there in the market, right?
Right. No, absolutely. And I think it's going to go not in both. There will be more, right? So it's great you brought up the 2008 release of the iPhone, and what changed the landscape so dramatically there was probably the following of the App Store, right? The fact that you can have everyone building on the operating system, and the phone is just really your medium to get there.
Right.
I definitely think you're going to have a lot of that here, and this is where I feel like Apple will be really prominent because they have all the wearables, all the devices you're touching all the time. You've got a good foundation. But who's to say you're not going to build off of the Cohere LLM or the Anthropic or the OpenAI, and then embed that into the way your platform works? So I think the delivery mechanism will be very different than we use today. Like when you log into ChatGPT, you can log into Anthropic, you can log into a Cohere. I think it has to be more embedded. It has to be more embedded to your specific use case.
Yeah.
And that dynamic will definitely evolve over time. And I think the example I used a week or two ago was Microsoft Excel, and you and I were laughing. Oh yeah, we're just old farts.
Yeah,
And
right.
we
Yeah,
like it, but the next iteration maybe it won't be Excel, right? So I kind of
it's true.
agree with where Evan was going on that. But
No, it's true.
yeah,
I think you're right about the last mile because I mean, when I go around, walk around, and talk with people about AI, most people are like, "Oh yeah, like AI, yeah, like I've used ChatGPT or I saw it on Google when I did a Google search or whatever it is, right?" But I think to your point, it's that like the actual application, like the use case, it hasn't hit yet. And that to me, I think is what's going to come over this next year or 2 years. And the developers that are like building out those use cases, what models or platform they decide to pick on, I think that to your point, that's going to be those will be the winners.
yeah,
So if
and
so, and I do think too, like having worked at some large companies, right? If you're going to pick a model as an executive, a senior executive, going with the one that everyone's already using is an easy way to do it. It's already new, right? So if you're like, oh yeah, we use OpenAI, like everybody's using it. It's like an easy way to start. There's less risk, like personal capital risk that you have
right.
associated with that, right? Even if it's more expensive, right? Even if it's more expensive, it's better because it's like less risk for
So
you as
here's
a person,
yeah.
right?
So here's a question though. There's definitely a space race equivalent here for data. And
Yeah,
let's say that the vendor you're buying data from, just make it easy, is a particular newspaper based in New York. And
yeah,
you've been buying their data for ages, and now they've sold their data to company X, and that's
right.
the LLM. What's more important, the fact that you were using the LLM before, or the fact they were using the data before? Because some of these data licenses are going to be rather exclusive. So do you
Sure.
care more about the underlying inputs, or do you care about the delivery mechanism,
Well,
or how it's sliced and diced, like basically the analyst layer?
yeah, so I would say like if I was I was at Morgan Stanley and TD, right, and London Stock Exchange. So if I was at one of those three places, I would say first I would want to know that the model that I'm picking is going to be accurate, right? So like I would run through this analysis of like a series of questions. Let's come up with some kind of test, like an internal test. Which one is accurate for what we're looking to do and have some kind of accuracy test. Once I felt like those are certain accuracy, then I probably looked at language and then I probably asked the development team if they had a preference on like which API suite was better or whatever, right? So that would be that. On the data side, I'm maybe less. I think the only reason I would ever or maybe that's not true, but like depending on the use case I was trying to solve for within the business, I think I'd probably be bringing my own data, right? So unless the data that the company sourced to train the model off of was somehow going to lead it to be more or less accurate, right? So like if they did license this data that I had already been licensing from someone else to train their model, that's great. But I think, and then that made it somehow more accurate. That's good too. I think I would be more interested in like how can my proprietary data be used, whether it's customer data or market data or whatever it is, right? Like whatever we're doing at that particular time from a law firm contract data that I had, to inform and use that and kind of and get information out of the large language model solution that we built specifically for our business,
Right.
right? That to me, I think would be probably how I would go about thinking about a project like that at a big company. Um, Yeah, I think we're like Nick. I just think there's going to be two or three big winners, just like there is. There's like Apple and Android.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be like two or three of these things. That's it. That really run, and the rest, like even with Apple, like we're about to go into this Apple conversation. They use Google search. I know everyone's talking about Apple building their own models, but I don't. I mean, they very well could just say like, hey, we're going to work on the hardware piece, and we're going to let somebody else do the AI model thing. And there's like two or three platforms for AI, and that's it, right? I think that could be a very real thing,
Right. And
So I mean,
unless it comes in waves where like Yahoo, MapQuest, like all these companies had a big head start, right?
yeah,
And
it's
then
true.
Google eventually came in because um, they 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 entered at the right time, or in AI the equivalent might be the cost of compute is decreased so significantly or
Mm-hmm.
the competitive advantage that someone has through like a core weave, that sort of idea
Right.
might change things. So I think there could be a wave where you've got two clear winners, and of those clear winners, you're going to have an eventual third or fourth that completely disrupts the market thereafter.
Right.
But
Right.
that might be 5 years from now at
Yeah.
the pace things are going. So
Yeah. I
let's see.
think that's
Yeah.
right. I think that's right. This is just really it's really interesting to the reason I spend so much time thinking about this is because I'm an investor, right? So as you look at this AI ecosystem, like where do you place your bets? And like we talked about last week, like picks and shovels are obvious ones, and I think everybody's agreed on that, right? So picks and shovels are obvious ones. But I think in the long run, where the money will be made will be in this kind of application layer or use case layer, right? Whatever word you want to use. And I think the companies that I think they're going to gravitate to two or three of these like large language model platforms, and then the use cases will start to pop up where there's like proprietary data sets or business consulting or whatever it is. I don't know what it. There's probably to be determined. If I knew, I'd be investing in it, right? So like I think it'd be interesting to see like what pops out and what ends up kind of being the direction. It's too early for me, I think, to at least for my clients to really start to put your finger out and say like that's the one, that's the place we need to go. Right.
I'm going to put my finger on something that I think is important because, yeah, you just brought up something that's very, very cool. And it reminds me of, things that, let's say an expert network is now doing where they're recording all the call transcripts. This might just become like a self-checkout. Do I want to pay $1,000 to have an expert call, or do I want to pay $500? And I know it's probably not that cheap. Do I want to pay $500 for self-checkout? And I can kind of ask the exact same questions into the model, and it goes, boop, boop, boop. Let's see what we got. Well, we had 5 experts that kind of sit in that area. 3 of them responded similarly, and here's the generic output.
Right.
And the throughput on something like that would just be incredible, and
it's awesome.
There's no doubt that's exactly what's going on, but maybe it's commensurate to self-checkout when you go to Target, like you don't want to deal with a person right now, but you want to just fire away and be semi-robotic about how you engage with someone. You're not having a nice fluid conversation. You could just pound that thing with like 100 different questions in a row, and it's not going to be on its back foot.
That's right.
And the level of candor is really the best possible. So if you had to get through 5 conversations to get the answer you wanted, or only one person was willing to answer, there you go. You know what? The model might have it for you. So, I mean, as we even think about some of these things on the fly, it just shows how little has been thought up, and can be done in the future. So, yeah, this is, as investors, we need to all think about 10 years from now, 20 years from now, because that's where the big wins are going to be. That's where you buy the
that's hard.
NVIDIA from 20 years ago, or do the Warren Buffett style hold, where he just sits on those companies for so long because he had such a forward-thinking view.
That's right.
That's right. Important. So hopefully we're doing some of that for the watchers of the pod.
I mean, it's going to be like that I believe, like just like you said about the indexes, I think the top 15, 20 companies in the S&P are going to look. There's going to be a lot of very different companies in 15 years than there is today, and it's the same reason you just said here. Like the applications and kind of solutions that will exist in 15 years, I think will be different today. Like one, just not to like wax philosophical here, because we should talk about OpenAI and Apple, but like the one thing that I think will drive that hits home to everybody right now, because I think a lot of people in my circle have young children. I do. They're in school. Is that I think like in 10 years time, all the kids will have their own AI tutor. I think like the classroom is going to look very different than it does today. I still think there'll be teachers, right? I just don't think they're going to be standing in front of the classroom, like teaching a lesson. I think it's good, but much more like individualized solutions, and to be a teacher plus an AI model and the AI model will be doing most of the teaching, and the teacher will be there to kind of like supplement and guide, right, on a macro level. So, I think you'll see kids that will fly right through school, and they'll be done in like a couple years time with elementary school because they're just smart, right? And then there'll be other kids that will, go down a different path, and they'll be whatever. have a trade or something. Like I just think it will be the AI will just do wonders for our children
It's
and educating them.
the next iteration of Montessori is what this will
Yeah,
be,
man.
right?
It's
Yeah.
it's big. It's a big deal. But I have like a 6-year-old. So like 10 years from now, he's 16. He's a sophomore in high school. Like it's not even like, and it's not that far away, right? It's really wild. It's really wild how this stuff will change. So I can't even imagine but that's one example that I talk about. But okay, what are your thoughts on Apple, this OpenAI and Apple kind of tie up? What have you read about it? What are you thinking about that kind of partnership?
Sure. So I'll again push it back to a speech that I gave last week, where the biggest firms, whether you're looking at the the newest breed, the ones that are all like sub 14 years old that I mentioned before, or the biggest
Yep.
firms that are in the S&P 500, they need to cement their dominance. And I mean, you're taking this clear front runner, which is OpenAI, combining it with one of the top 5 companies in the world, and away you go. Like you're in perfect shape to secure your dominant advantage for the next few years. Any ability for
Right.
someone to catch up is going to take them multiple years to get where you are today. With once that partnership is done, and by that
Mm-hmm.
point, you'll be years ahead of where you are today. So
Right.
I think this is a brilliant move. I don't personally use Siri, but I'm probably in the minority for that. And I think pushing it in terms of encouraging things at a developer event makes great sense as well. You know, think about the advent of the App Store and how developers got it so excited to build something for themselves. Maybe this is the new 2008, you know, for that regard. So I think this is brilliant. I don't love the fact that you're taking two big players and making it better
Right.
for competitive purposes, you know.
Yeah.
But it is a brilliant move here, from both firms, I'd say.
Yeah, I'm really interested, and like as we're recording this, I literally think they're doing the Apple developer conference like as we're on here. So I'm sure we'll get details about what this is going to look like. I'm like dying to see like the actual details, like what exactly are they partnering on? Like Siri is one thing, right? Like you kind of mentioned, there might be some tie into the apps. So maybe you can use Siri through apps. You can like call on Siri to do things for you through apps, or maybe there's just a tie directly into OpenAI through, through Apple's, kind of development language there. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what's possible or what's going to happen. I mean, I just like, honestly, I love using AI in my day-to-day life, and I am an iPhone user. So like the idea that it could kind of be like an agent for me on the iPhone is super interesting to me.
Sure. So here's one that I was thinking of prior to the pod that I thought would be relevant for you. A lot of what Apple stands on is in and around security. And
Right.
a lot of the functions that you and I likely want to use this for will be across what we empower it to be used for. So we would give the data, we would give some insights onto how we want the Siri 2.0 to operate.
Right.
How comfortable are you now with OpenAI combined with Siri accessing your
Yeah.
particular contacts, knowing what they look like, and then saying, hey, can you pull up the pictures of Clint from 2019, and it digs them out, and they know you could tell what Clint looks like because in photos, I use that all the time on the iPhone. I wanted a picture of my old Land Rover. I typed it in and it pulled up 10 photos for me. How
Right.
comfortable are you with that power being then pushed into your phone? Because Apple's big on privacy, right? So
That's true.
what are we actually gonna use this thing for
I mean,
Siri?
like that, I think it would matter. Look, I think everybody, like we're all kind of like the same age, right? So like, I would say like we've all gone through this where inherently you get like very private about things. Something new comes out, you're like, ooh, like I'm not going to give him any of my stuff. Like that's crazy. You know what I mean? Like there was a time in my life where if you put like your phone number or your address on the internet, that was like a hard no. You're going to put your personal information like that on on the internet, like anybody could get it. Like now it's like everybody's got that stuff out there. There's some people who don't, right? But most people, I think, like that's like you can get that from a lot of different places. Like, what's the big deal? Just do it, right? So, I think I think there's going to be similar type situations like this, right? The AI is not going to be any different. I think depending on the use case, you'll be presented with a use case. You'll be like, ooh, that's like very helpful. And you'll like magically get comfortable sharing that data, right? Because it will like help you and it will save you time and it make your life easier. Be like, what's the big deal? Like, I'll just hit that button, and then it works, right? So, the harder thing I have for is like, for example, like, I use Google Drive for work, right? I like, you can connect your Google Drive to OpenAI. I haven't done that yet. You know what
Right.
I mean? Like, like to your point, like, I don't, and I read the data privacy stuff and it's like,
You
we
read
only
it.
use
Oh
it
man.
and we don't store it. We don't, cause I was serious, man. I was going to connect it. Cause then you could like talk to ChatGPT and it can pull stuff out of files in Google Drive.
Right.
Like, that's sick. You know what I mean? Like, I can tap into my own personal database and use ChatGPT. Like, that's pretty cool. And I think I can think of like really interesting applications to that, but it's just like, oh man, like I got like a lot of proprietary stuff in there. You know what I mean? And like, I don't know, like now I'm like giving the AI access to it.
I'd bifurcate it, but that I'm probably going to look into that later in the week. That sounds
You see
brilliant.
what
I
you see what
didn't
I'm
know that
saying? Like,
existed.
yeah,
And
this is the stuff where I'm like, and I think to your question, like this is where the same thing, everybody will go through that same like rationalization when Apple does this with AI, right?
right.
And they'll be like, okay, well, what am I comfortable with? What's the use case? Okay, I'll do it. Okay, I do it. And then eventually, like you say, no. And finally you're like, just like annoying. Yes.
Yeah,
Right. And then
that's
you're on the
very,
other side
very
of it.
true.
Right.
That's the psychology, right? Because you're not opening up your Google Drive yet. All that same stuff is probably in your Gmail anyways, first off. And oftentimes Twitter wants connection to a microphone, a photo or contacts. I'll always say no, but eventually, yeah, you're going to have to say yes.
Because
So
you
yeah,
want to put something up
it'll
there.
get there.
Yeah.
And you know that anyone 10 years younger than we are would have just hit yes the first or second time anyways, So
they're like, yeah,
and
they're done.
and who cares? We're going to wallow away in 50 years time.
Yeah,
So
I
it's more about
just
that generation.
yeah, I just run. I suppose I run on the pretext that like, you know, there's everybody has access to everybody's data, right? So I kind of eventually like it's all out there. So maybe that's a little bit pessimistic, but my gut is just saying that that's probably the case, right? Like if I can sit and pull up Google and find stuff on prospects or whatever, just doing a 5-minute Google search, right, and I can find an unbelievable amount of information about a person or a sales somebody I'm trying to do sales and get them to buy my product. I mean, what can you do if you're like a proper developer?
Right.
Right? I mean, you're going to be able to get a lot more data. So, like, I don't think that's hacking. I'm not talking about hacking or doing anything criminal. Just like data that's already out there about you, right? Or what you can infer from social media or whatever, right? So, like, I just there's like a lot of stuff out there. I think I'm just really interested in the use cases. I'm sure there's just like anything that will be like, canned use cases that Apple will highlight and people will be like, oh, that's awesome. Right. And then, of course, those things will just get better over time. And then to your point, I'm sure, there's going to be apps that will start to hit the iPhone and there'll be some way to like kind of do like multimodal stuff on the apps. Like these use cases are really, it's going to drive it home for people. And I think unleash kind of the whole AI thing. Right. Most people, I don't even think will realize that they're using AI.
Correct.
It will be like when apps first came out, it was just kind of like magic. Like, oh, it works, and I think it'd be a lot of that, for some of these use cases, but
right. I think that's the important part for many. Right now, it's a novelty. So when you're searching for something on Google, they made it very clear that it looked more, hey, we're working on this problem for you, even just the response time of the search engine right now. But more than likely in the next year or two, it's just going to be a presupposition that you're already in it. You know what? That's just how things operate now. And
well, dude, it was like what we were telling you at dinner. Like, there's already stuff. Oh, ChatGPT, you can do things. I didn't even know it could do it. Like, I had email addresses and I wanted to get the person's first name, and I asked ChatGPT to do it, and it like did it. Right. I was like, well, I didn't even know it could do that. You know what I mean? So like, and it came back with like this super thoughtful response, and it was like, oh, I'm going to break it up into different chunks because we're going to get timed out. And it was like, I was like, where did this come from? Like, this is nuts. You know what I mean? So like, there's things that, this is what I'm saying. I just, like, to your point, people haven't connected the dots yet. Like, you have this thing, it can do it. It can already do it, but I don't know
we're not
how
aware.
to use it properly. Right. So like, and if I don't know, my thesis with a lot of this stuff, Nick, it's like been this, if I don't know how to do it, then probably half the population doesn't know how to do it either. Right. So like
51% or more. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like I put myself smack in the average category, right? So like half the people probably don't know how to do it either. Right. So then that's a lot of people that need help, you know, kind of like connecting those dots. There's a lot of businesses that can be built that will make a lot of money.
Right.
Connecting dots like that. Right.
That's not known. Yeah, and you're right. That's all going to be, or a lot will be at the application layer. So that's the next frontier here. Over time.
Remember the apps that came out in 2008? How silly they were.
Oh yeah.
You know, they did like they would do like one thing. You know what I mean? Like you had an app
metric to to feet and miles, right? Yeah, stuff.
Right, and you would pay for it. Remember, you would pay for it. You would
pay like $99. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think we're gonna have that. I think we're gonna have that with AI. I think people will make an AI that does like one thing. You know what I mean? And everyone will be like, "Ooh, I want to do that," and they'll pay like $3 or whatever for that. And you could literally go on ChatGPT and do it, but I don't know how to do it. Right? So I'll use this app that this developer made to do it, and it'll do it for me. Right?
Yeah, I wonder how those are
$3.
I wonder how they'll be priced, because the cost of compute to compare feet and meters is nothing, but the cost to run some, I don't know, medium-sized LLMs could add up. You know, so it's gonna be strange in terms of how this stuff gets priced out too. Not that we need one more thing to contribute to real price inflation, but yeah, let's see how this goes. If it's on right now while we're recording, I'm sure we can grab some good comments on
for next week. Yeah, awesome. For next week. Yeah, this is the big thing I'm really looking hard at, right? I mean, I'm talking with all my clients now about how we get into the picks and shovels place, right? Because I think those have started to firm up a little bit, and then we're placing bets on the large language models side of things. Because as discussed, I think there's going to be some winners there. So if you can pick one of the winners, if that is true, that there'll be a handful of winners, and it is true that there'll be like 2 or 3, like a Apple and Android type situation on the App Store, then you'll stand to make some money there. And then, but I'm really focused on this like application layer. I don't know what else to call it, right? That like application use case layer. Because I think there's going to be some big businesses that will get built there, you know. And I haven't seen anything kind of pop out yet, right?
So if it's like any other Apple event, they're going to showcase a couple of use cases. So put a part 2 in for next week on this. This will be perfect.
You got it, Ryan. You got it, man. All right. Well, listen, let's end it there. This is awesome, Nick. I appreciate it too. It's very special that it could be just the 2 of us today, right? It's nice.
Good times, man.
All right, brother. I'll talk to you. Okay,
appreciate
man.
it.
Take care.